Hello and welcome to Light O'Clock. Today we have a special episode lined up for you. So in our last episode, if you remember, we explored the relationship between circadian rhythms, mental health and bipolar disorder with guest Professor Danny Smith. In that episode, Danny was describing to us the studies that are taking place in Edinburgh on the relationship between light sensitivity and bipolar disorder. So as a special episode for Season 2, we thought it was worth picking that conversation back up once again and diving even deeper in the topic of collaboration between individuals with lived experience and researchers for designing research studies. Which means that for this episode, I had the pleasure to have not just one, but 3 fantastic guests that all play different roles in one of the studies that are taking place in Edinburgh, the HELIOS-BD study. And so without much further ado, let's dive into that conversation. Amy, would you like to start by telling us a bit about your background and your role in this project?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Dr Amy Ferguson. I'm from the University of Edinburgh, and I am the network scientific coordinator for the Circadian Mental Health Network. But along with that, I've got a great interest in making sure lived experience voices are heard throughout research. That's one of the major aspects of the network that I'm part of. But with that, I'm also more involved with these 2 studies at Edinburgh, HELIOS-BD and Ambient-BD, and I help facilitate some of our lived experience advisory panel meetings and some other bits and pieces as well.
Yeah, and maybe just to follow up on that, could you describe to us briefly what lived experience means in this context?
So in this context, as lived experience is basically we are involving the expertise of individuals who live with, in this case, conditions like bipolar disorder, or some people just like to say bipolar. So that's basically, we're trying to make sure that people who actively live this in their daily lives have a say in what is happening with research.
That's great. Thank you so much for that clarification. And Nomhle and Patrica are also with us today. Could you both introduce yourselves and share a little about your involvement? Maybe we can start with Nomhle.
Hey, I'm Nomhle, and I was diagnosed with bipolar in 2015. And then I got an invitation to be part of the HELIOS-BD research, where basically my contribution is really lived experience with bipolar disorder. But I think the little flavor that I bring is in terms of also the South African interpretation thereof, because of just basically where I'm from, where I live, and interact with other people with bipolar as well. So it's been an exciting experience. I don't really have technical expertise. The only thing that I bring really to the platform is how would that impact me? How do I understand that? Those kind of questions are what I would usually respond to.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. What about you, Patrica?
I was diagnosed with bipolar back in 2016 on my own with a 10-year-old boy. So that's a different perspective to things as well. I found out about the LEAP project through working with Bipolar Scotland, which is another brilliant organisation, obviously, focusing in bipolar. And it's just been outstanding to see people taking a real interest in, like Amy said, the real people living through these issues that they're studying. I think I've grown so much over the years to learn about bipolar, but this is a whole new perspective that I wasn't aware of. So I just find the whole thing very interesting, and the different perspectives in the group and what the experts know as well. So it's a great study to be part of.
Yeah, that's great. And these different perspectives are really what I would like to discuss with you guys today. Amy, you mentioned you're the coordinator of the Circadian Mental Health Network, and I wanted to spend just a little bit of time at the beginning of this episode to discuss what the network is, what it does, and maybe you can give us an overview of its aims.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Circadian Mental Health Network is basically a network of researchers, clinicians, clinical support staff, other kind of support members. So like members of like Bipolar Scotland, the Sleep Charity, the McPinn Foundation, as well as other members of the public, and especially individuals with the lived experience of mental health conditions and experience of disrupted sleep and circadian rhythms. So it's basically a big collaborative network to try and pull in as many different voices as we can. And with that, one of our main objectives is to try and kind of set the research agenda going forward of what should research really be investigating according to the experts, which are the people that live with mental health conditions, disrupted circadian rhythms, disrupted sleep, and the people that treat and work with people with these experiences as well. So that's one of our main objectives, is to make sure research focuses on what's really important.
Yeah.
And so we do that in other ways as well to try and support research to do that. So we try and help keep research open and give people tools and training in order to do that and put it into their own research. And then we also support ECRs going forward.
Hey, Kato here, quick interruption. ECR means early career researcher, which basically just means someone at the beginning of their research career.
That already work in this kind of field. So ECRs like yourself, Carolina, so that are doing fantastic things about getting the science out there and making it understandable, and then growing science in a good direction as well. So that's kind of what our network is really about.
Yeah, and maybe I can jump in there briefly to mention that, in fact, Light O'Clock, so this podcast, is funded by the Circadian Mental Health Network. And I want to mention this because I think it's great that the network funds science communication projects. And I hope also this sets the agenda also for other networks, similar research foundations to also fund science communication projects, or also maybe for other people who have an interest in science communication to maybe think that they can actually apply for funding. Because I mean, it was also quite new to me, the fact that, actually I have this idea in mind, but I never thought that we could apply for funding to bring this forward. And I think it's great that, Light O'Clock can actually go ahead thanks to the network. And maybe, Amy, one more question for you. So the network kind of brings together different aspects of researching the link between circadian rhythms and mental health. So is there a growing need to explore this relationship? And maybe can you give us a little bit of an overview of the science on this? I know this is a big question, but maybe we can condense it to a couple of key points.
Yeah, so I don't want to go into the full history and deep dive of science because we'll be here all day. So I'm going to just give a kind of brief thing about why it's so important. We've known for so long that there is a connection between obviously what goes on in our bodies and our circadian rhythms. Our circadian rhythms are basically the clock that makes sure we are aligned and our bodies are aligned to what's going on in our environment. And with that also comes into how our brains function and all the other things that go on to try and make sure we're aligned to our environment. So when we have disruptions of that, it can have impacts on both our physical health and our mental health. So anybody that's had a bad night's sleep can tell you how grumpy they are the next morning. And that's not fantastic for your mental health if you're grumpy every day because you haven't slept. So that's a very anecdotal example, but of just how deep these kind of things can go and how interconnected these two aspects are. Changing anything in your rhythms can have a knock-on effect for your physical and your mental health. But there's still so much we don't understand about how that works and what is important to know about it. So that's what the network is trying to do. We've currently got a survey going on so people can choose the questions that are important to them. And then we can tell research, okay, here are the top 10 things we really should be looking at that are important to people that live with circadian disruption, with mental health difficulties, with disrupted sleep, with any and all of these things. These are the things we should be looking at. And that project's still going on at the moment. So our survey is still open until the 17th of February for that. But hopefully I can come back at some point and tell you what those top 10 questions are and what is really important to people and that what research should be looking at.
Yeah, I think this is such a fresh and new approach that I think will bring really a lot of new insights that really matter for, research studies to actually, new questions to answers that are really important. And in terms of the HELIOS-BD project, so we discussed this with Danny in the last episode, so I'm not going to give a big overview of the project because I think if listeners are really interested in knowing what it is about, they can go back and listen to that. But it is a project that looks at the relationship between light sensitivity in bipolar disorder. And I wanted to ask Patricia and Nomhle, how did you guys get involved with this project? Where did you hear about the possibility of being part of the Lived Experience Advisory Board, which I think is called is this the LEAP acronym that you guys were mentioning? Yeah, right? Just to clarify also for the listeners. Yeah, how did you hear about it and how did you decide to be part of this? Maybe we can start with Patricia.
Yes, I think for me it was working alongside Bipolar Scotland originally, doing some volunteering, and I had studied a counselling, get a counselling certificate, and just looking at different things to do, and then the kind of pointed me in this direction to see if that would be something that I'd be interested in, because they know me and I'm anything that makes sense and can dive further into what I'm dealing with day to day is me. So it was pretty simple for me and it was an easy decision.
So you saw the ad somewhere and you were like, oh, actually, I want to be part of this panel.
Yeah, I think my connections in Bipolar Scotland gave me that. It kind of pointed me in that direction.
Nice. What about for you, Nomhle? How did you come across the study?
So I so happened to comment on a video that Ian had posted. Quite honestly, I was posting so that he could keep posting videos. And then we started speaking like that. And a while later, then he said, hey, this is what we're doing. If you're interested, please let me know. And we kind of started talking about it from that perspective.
Maybe just so that everybody knows who Ian is. So Ian Campbell is another one of the kind of like co-investigators that's working on HELIOS-BD. And Ian has a major interest in lived experience as well, and is quite interested in kind of bringing creative aspects into things as well, which is probably what we're going to talk about really, really soon when we come to Helios, because it's a major aspect of it. But that is who Ian is. So Ian is also a very important part of Helios.
Great. So once you kind of got involved in being part of this panel, what were the tasks that you guys had to do? So for someone who doesn't really know how co-design works, where did you guys start? I'm guessing, just to give the listeners an overview, usually how scientists and clinicians design studies is, they have research questions in mind, like something that they're very curious about or something that has not been answered yet. And they design a study to then answer this question. Now, in terms of collaborating with a lived experience panel, how does this collaboration shape the study? I know this is a bit of an abstract question. You can also give us some concrete example.
So in terms of our participation, it's all the fun stuff, like let's choose a logo for our team or the project. And then it's also, there is a bit of reading. So does this poster communicate what we actually trying to say? How does it come across to a person who's living with bipolar? Is the language sensitive enough? So there's that lens that we bring as people with lived experience to the study. But except for that, I think as they progress with the study, for an example, it's I don't know whether to call it the little things, but it's things such as, how do you ensure that participants actually don't drop out? So I would know that I would totally want my family on board. They must be aware, because they'll also be able to communicate. For an example, if I can't make it for a study, then they can get in touch with Amy and say, Nomhle's not feeling well, she can't pitch, instead of just going AWOL, which is very likely if you're still trying to get a hold of your illness. So it's just those little things. Well, they're big. Amy, you can provide some context with the contributions are as effective as we would like to believe. But so those are like the things that we would contribute as well. And I think there are also nuances in terms of the study. that a person with lived experience would bring. So, for an example, if they're saying, does the light make a difference, whether it's, for an example, with South Africa, right? Does the light make a difference? Because sometimes we've got load shedding, we're expecting it to start. So load shedding is power cuts. They are scheduled power cuts. And so when I brought that onto the table to say in South Africa, we have power cuts, and I know instances where people have gone fully into an episode because of a power cut. So those are some of the things that Amy might not be privy to, but because I've lived it, and then I'm able to bring that perspective, and then it adds just a bit of a dimension to that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And so do you guys meet up online remotely to have like discussions on like how to shape the HELIOS-BD study? I'm guessing now the HELIOS-BD study is ongoing, so these discussions took place some time ago.
Yeah, so we have people from all over the place in our Helios Leap. So obviously Nomhle is in South Africa. We have another member who's in the US. Trisha's a little bit closer to home in Glasgow, but we have people from all over the place that join and share their experience with us. Part of the Helios project is ongoing, but even with that, there is kind of bits of feedback that we can always get from our Leap to help us adjust things, because sometimes as these processes go through, if a participant comes in to try and be part of the study and they incur a problem that we hadn't thought of, so we can bring that to our group at the Leap and be like, okay, this kind of thing has happened. What have we done something that's made this more uncomfortable? Is there something we could do to help this? What would you like to see in these types of situations? And that's been fantastically helpful. So it's always a kind of ongoing co-production, even when the study itself has already started and we've got participants coming in. The lived experience we can use all the way throughout, and it really helps make that participant experience way more comfortable. And I know that the participants that come into this really appreciate the adjustments and the time and effort that gets put in, and especially having like Nomhle and Trisha on the Leap and giving their experience has really, really helped retain people that would maybe have dropped out beforehand.
Yeah. So it's basically ensures to design a study where participants actually want to keep going and not drop out because it's too demanding for them, right?
Exactly.
Patricia, earlier you mentioned that like participating in this co-design and in the Leap gave you also like a new perspective on your experience. So maybe can you give us some more insights into this? What did the co-design process kind of bring to you that you were not aware before?
I think for me personally, it was a confidence thing, because bipolar was just a black hole. For me, it was just there was nothing good about it. But I was starting to find wee bits and pieces, and then being part of this and actually having a voice that not just recognised but appreciated, because I can talk openly about what I'm going through and that kind of thing. So it really has been like inspiring, and it's developing my understanding of what I live with. So that in itself is becoming a power rather than a negative in my life. So
yeah,
in that sense, it's been amazing.
That's great. And earlier Amy, you mentioned that there are quite a lot of creative aspects that go into this study. Can you give us some examples on some of them?
So one kind of thing that Helios is doing is also to try and make what people experience in bipolar and the reactions they have to light in different situations, to try and make that something visual for everyone to kind of see and understand and resonate with. So we're basically taking some of the experiences that our Leap have shared. We take these like anonymously. So like through an anonymous form, people can put down their experience, and we basically kind of put that through some software, some like AI generation, and create pieces of art to kind of describe what those experiences are like. And even then, that piece of art, a lot of the time it comes out and be like, okay, AI has done some weird things there. That's not right. This is what we are actually experiencing. So there's a lot of feedback, even in that process of this generation of art, to make sure that we are trying to depict as best as we can what the experience is in bipolar so that everyone can see and understand.
That's really cool. I was wondering also, I mean, from like a collaboration aspect, if there was anything for Nomhle and Patricia that was surprising about collaborating with scientists and researchers, or maybe, let's say, ideas that they had that were not maybe exactly the same as the one you guys were experiencing.
So I think one of the things that was surprising with working with scientists, firstly, is that there are scientists who are working on this around the clock. That was shocking, with a deep and a very serious interest in bipolar, because when you've got bipolar and you're going through the motions of whether it's depression or mania, it's a very lonely journey and you don't know whether it's going to end. But the mere fact that there are people working on it, and it's not just arbitrary working on it, you actually see the passion coming through, the care coming through from that. And that's one of the things that have come through as I've interacted with scientists. I really also am amazed at how, because when you're reading the study versus when you're talking to the scientists, it does make a big difference. So interacting with them has been helpful in that sometimes they don't understand something and they'll kind of phrase it in a way that really helps. But the other thing that has been amazing is just the sheer knowledge. You'll hint at something and you'll kind of phrase it in an everyday, I don't know what this is. And the scientists will say, actually, the observation has been, and then provide even more context to that. So that has been one of the things about interacting with our scientists. I mean, we call Amy, and I didn't even know that she's like a doctor. I was like, what? That's so crazy. So that's how relatable the interactions have been. Very, very human.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. There's nothing. I get overwhelmed very easily, as I'm sure you do normally, and I don't ever feel overwhelmed working with this project, or even online. I can get really stressed, and I don't with this because I don't know, it makes me feel accepted maybe, and that's something that I don't often feel, and that's really deep. But that's the reality. So, and I agree with everything you said as well, Nomhle, about just having scientists really caring and really interested and on our side almost in a sense. So
we are definitely on your side. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think also a lot of times as scientists, you use like terminologies that are not very accessible to people who are not, working 24/7 on this topic. So I think it's what you describe, I just needed clarification on certain things. I think this is very valid, and it's great that you have people who can break this down to you, and that this feels like a very accessible way. And I think this also relates back to something we were discussing earlier on, what the Circadian Mental Health Network is trying to do to, make science really accessible and not just keep it to the scientists. And I just want to circle back to one aspect of co-design that I don't think we've touched in our conversation. So you have a very diverse group of individuals with lived experience who come together in a group to discuss with researchers aspects of, for example, the study, the HELIOS-BD study. How can certain aspects of the design of the study be improved so that individuals who are actually participating in the study, who have diagnosis of bipolar disorder, feel comfortable participating in? And of course, the individuals within the group itself are coming from very different countries, which means a very different cultural background, and also might have a very different sensitivity to speaking about bipolar disorder itself. So I wanted to ask how this experience is and whether it can be challenging sometimes.
Yeah, I would just like to speak about the code design across time periods and how really and also around the cultural part of it in terms of how do you then bring everybody on board. So some of the things that come across is because of the different personalities and where we are in the management of bipolar, the participation in the co-design needs to cater for that, because you are at the end of the day dealing with people with a mental illness. So in the code design, because of the topics that can sometimes be covered, they can be quite triggering. And I think Patricia kind of hinted at that. And so there's that element within the study, like the designers of this group, they need to cater for that. And so those are some of the skills that are then brought in to assist code design, because you will have triggering conversations unintentionally, right? And so I think what happened in the HELIOS is we have one of the scientists who is specifically dedicated to kind of managing that side as well. In terms of the cultural elements of it, it does take a bit of some time to kind of have conversations around certain things. Sometimes we've even visited certain topics more than once because there's something there, can we revisit it? But also it's the translation of whatever I'm saying so that it can be understood by somebody in another context, right? So for an example, what I spoke about was the issue of seasonality, right? And then Patricia who then came in and said, I also have the same experience, but then now the scientists have to kind of put that language in a way that can be understood by everybody, because sometimes there's some, maybe it can be belief system, it can be cultural elements to it that need to be removed so that everybody is on the page. And that's kind of like the other aspect of code design that becomes important, and probably I would think I stand to be corrected, it also is one of the more difficult parts of it.
Yeah, so basically trying to make sure that within the co-design group itself, there is like clarity in what everyone is experiencing. And if someone expresses like a certain experience with light, for example, that then the scientists try to convert that into like an experience that other people can either relate to or say, oh no, actually I don't experience this. And that this maybe also changes across, I'm guessing also where you live and your culture, right? I also find interesting that you mentioned that, of course, some of these co-design aspects can also be triggering for the co-design group itself. Thank you for sharing this. And yeah, maybe, Amy, I was wondering if now I can flip the question to you. So on the other hand, has there been any surprising kind of outcome that the co-design has brought to the study? So we mentioned that, of course, it's made the study more feasible for the participants because, of course, having the insights of individuals with lived experience, then, we are enabling also the participants of the HELIOS-BD study to really stick to the study and also be happy to contribute. Mm-hmm. What other aspects have been influenced by the co-design?
There's actually been quite a few, because there's maybe things that you necessarily wouldn't have found in like previous literature or other studies that have maybe been mentioned about kind of light and bipolar. So one aspect of HELIOS is we're looking at kind of all of the aspects of how we perceive light. So we're looking at eyes, we're looking at sleep patterns. There's all kind of different things that are happening within HELIOS that we're looking at. And some of those aspects have been informed by the LEAP sharing their experience about like how different seasons visually impact what they're seeing, and how it's not even just a perception of that everything's a bit grayer. Everything is grayer. Everything is brighter when it's spring. Things like that has really made a big impact on some of the things that the study has looked at. So there have been parts of the project that have really honed in on different aspects to investigate that haven't maybe been brought up in such a way before. Just from LEAP being able to share their experience, it's really directed the project in so many fantastic ways that we might not have thought about without speaking with lived experience individuals.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So As we are wrapping up this episode, wanted to ask Amy if there are any opportunities or anything that you want to flag about the Circadian Mental Health Network that are coming up.
That's a big question because I do actually have quite a few different exciting things to talk about. So I guess the first one is the survey that I kind of mentioned earlier, was that we hopefully will have our final top 10 questions that research should be answering about mental health, sleep and circadian rhythms. So we're going to be telling the whole research community what they should be focusing on, as well as just telling everyone, so the public, everyone who answered the survey, this is what came out of all of your votes and all of your questions. This is what is being brought forward, as well as answering some of the questions that people had that research has already tackled. So that's going to be a big project of the network, is communicating the science that's already happened that people have questions about that they maybe haven't been able to find the answer from because it's hidden deep in some scientific journals.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect that the network's going to be working on. Another thing, very excitingly, is that we're going to have our first conference in June. So you can check out our website for all of the information on that. So that's going to be very exciting. And again, that is open to absolutely everyone, which is very exciting. So that's the kind of major stuff happening with the network. For our HELIOS project, we talked a little bit about the art stuff that's happened. So you can check out the HELIOS website that gets updated with the different fantastic pieces of art that are created throughout this project as well as some of the different exhibitions and things that are coming up.
Super. Well, thank you so much, Nomhle, Patricia, and Amy, for sharing your expertise and your stories today with me and the listeners. It's been very inspiring to see how your personal lived experience can really shape science, and how, like clinicians, researchers, and individuals with lived experience can come together and really improve the understanding of circadian rhythms and mental health. So thank you so much for coming and chatting to me on this podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
And that was it from our side. As always, you can find relevant links and resources in the show notes. So we'll also put a link there to the survey that Amy was mentioning just now. And also, 2 exciting news. First, and I've just realized this as we're recording, we just turned 1 year old. So first episode of Light O'Clock was released around the 20th of February, 2024. So yay, happy birthday to Light O'Clock. And the second exciting news that I want to say today is that we've been cooking a brand new season of Light O'Clock, so season 3, and we'll be back in just about a month. I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but the season trailer will be released on March 18th. Catch you then. Light O'Clock is a podcast produced by the Translational Sensory and Circadian Neuroscience Unit, and we are supported by the Circadian Mental Health Network, the Viscom Prize from the Deutsche Gesellschaft für Psychologie and the Deutsche Gesellschaft für Psychophysiologie und ihre Anwendung, the Max Planck Society and the Max Planck Institute for Biological Cybernetics, and the Technical University of Munich.